Hello, and welcome to the Soul of Football podcast. My name is Kevin, and this is my podcast about football culture and the fans that keep football's soul alive. It's about the people in the stands, the songs on the terraces, the cities and neighborhoods that live and breathe their football clubs. I'm here because I believe football is one of the last places on earth where ordinary people still come together, stand shoulder to shoulder, and feel like they belong to something bigger than themselves. I am recording this first episode on December 4th, right in the middle of the Interior Ministers meeting in Bremen, in Germany, a meeting where politicians are discussing measures that could change German fan culture for years to come. In this first episode, I'm going to tell you why I'm doing this project, why this particular week matters so much, and what we're going to try and protect, celebrate, and rebuild together. If you've ever felt like football is more than just a game, if it feels like home, like ritual, like a little piece of your soul, then you are in the right place. I'll start with a little bit about myself in this project, and then we can get right into the big news and the big battle gripping German football. I started this project because I wanted to give back to the game, and more particularly the fan culture that has done so much for me. I was engaged with politics for quite some time, and it never quite felt right. It never quite felt alive. It felt like playing on the wrong playing field. I've been a football fan for all my life, but in my 20s, I took a break away from the game. And when I returned in my late 20s, I came back with a different perspective on the game. I was born into a Bayern Munich family. I have the scarf and the teeny tiny jersey from when I was 4 or 5 years old to prove it. And I stayed a Bayern Munich fan for a long time. But when I came back to football in my late 20s, in the late 2010s, I saw football as more than just a sport and a TV product. I started to recognize the community and the ritual and the culture behind it. And there's nowhere like Germany where that culture is so deeply embedded. In Germany, football clubs are Vereine. That's a legal structure that is protected under German law, which leads to the famous 50+1 rule, meaning that with a few rare and not very popular exceptions, all German clubs are majority owned by their members, and their members are generally their fans. The first moment that I really feel like I understood football to be something different was when I was introduced to Union Berlin. In their first home game after winning promotion to the Bundesliga, I saw 3 things that changed the way I feel about football. The first was, before the game, the fans held up pictures of friends, family, and fellow fans that hadn't lived to see Union Berlin's first promotion to the top division. Their promotion that year was the first time they had ever made it to the top division in the entire history of the club, and it was a moving and emotional scene to see the fans bringing with them those who didn't live to see the day. There was a lot of tears and a lot of emotion among the fans, and it really changed the way that I understood football as a community. That game, their first home game in the Bundesliga, was against a team that would become one of their great rivals in the Bundesliga. One of the arguably the most hated team in German football, Rasenballsport Leipzig. Now, most people know them as RB Leipzig, but I like to call them Rasenballsport because that was the stupid name they gave themselves. They wanted to have the RB abbreviation, but they weren't allowed to call themselves Red Bull. Because of the rules and laws that German football has, they cannot have the sponsor's name in the club name. So they had to find some way around that to get that RB branding they wanted so badly. So they came up with the name Rasenballsport, which basically means grass ball sport. So if you hear me from now on referring to them as such, it's because they're stupid. But anyway, so they were playing against the much hated Leipzig. And even though Leipzig went on to win that game quite convincingly 4-0, the fans sang every moment of the game. They sang before the game, they sang during the game, they sang after the game. They sang Even as the fourth goal went in, they sang even louder. And after the game was over, they saluted their team for the effort. It's not an unheard of thing in German football. But even in German football, where the fans are great, and they remember the club belongs to them, and so they feel a stronger bond than in many places now, to sing for the whole game, even when you're getting battered, and then to salute your team off with songs that ring into the air long after they've gone to the dressing room, that really changed my perspective. When I was young, I remember I was at a hockey game in Winnipeg, an ice hockey game. And as a small child, I was cheering for my team when I thought they needed it most, when they were down and out in the game. And I had a grown-ass man come up to me and tell me to sit down and shut up. Probably not quite that aggressively, but it really left an impression on me, because I always thought, isn't it when your team is down and struggling and getting beaten that they need their fans the most? So to see the Union Berlin fans sing their team off after a pummeling defeat, I knew I had found the home I'd been looking for. That was my gateway back into German football, and from that day, I loved Union Berlin. And ever since, I have learned a lot more. I've learned about the club structure. I've learned why German fans are so passionate. And I've learned why it is that German fans have many things that the fans of other football clubs do not. It's because of the club structure. It's because the clubs belong to the members, and the members are the fans. And so anytime anyone wants to raise ticket prices, they want to change the rules, they want to put matches that are anti-fan, the fans have the opportunity to say no. And in Germany, unlike pretty much anywhere else, not just in football, but anywhere where people stand up and defend themselves and have activism and protest, German fans get out in front and they sniff out trouble so that they're not having to fight on the back foot. German fans always get out on the front foot, as you will see in the stories today. Before I go any further, I just want to give a shout out, because it's important to note that this isn't just about German football. This is about all of the fans that keep the real spirit and the real soul of football alive. And one team that has came to my attention when I first started launching this project, through the first person to reach out to me, Oro, shout out to him, is San Francisco City FC, a team in the lower divisions of the USL in the United States. They're the oldest community-owned club in the United States, and they run on 50+1 logic and the structure, basic model of a German club. So I know that a couple of their fans and members sort of circle around my content, so I just wanted to give them a shout out, and to give them a shout out because they show that German club culture doesn't only exist in Germany. This project is also to push back against many issues I see in modern football: hyper-commercialization, anti-fan scheduling, the total loss of control of clubs by their fans and their communities, the raising of ticket prices, the destruction of standing terraces, the totalitarian control in many places that limit every possible means of expression that fans have unless it's strictly approved by the authorities. Germany is a place where the fans still have the control, or at least they don't let the control be taken away from them entirely. And that's exactly the kind of model I want to show to the world. So that gives us the perfect opportunity to begin with what is happening in Germany today. I record this podcast on December 4th, which, as I said, is the middle day of a 3-day conference in the German city of Bremen amongst the interior ministers of Germany. They had quite a number of proposals floating around that drew the attention of the German active fan scene and ultras groups. Initially, going into this, the first information that came out that drew the attention of the fans was some of their proposals. Those proposals include fully personalized tickets tied to individual identity, meaning that fans would have to show their identity cards and that their tickets would be linked to their identity cards. That might not sound like such a big deal, but it's a major threat to civil rights because it kind of reminds you of the classic joke about Germans. Let me see your papers. And the ultra scene is quite protective. The active fan scenes are quite protective of their autonomy and their anonymity and their rights. And also, if you do that, then it also reduces the ability for tickets to be sold or shared. It's just really, and there is really no reason for this to be done. Even the ministers can't really give any reason why this would be done. It's just for pure control. Another major sticking point was they were floating the idea of facial recognition and high-tech surveillance cameras powered by AI at all stadium entrances. Again, a massive intrusion into the civil rights and privacy of the entire fan base and everyone attending football matches. Again, under the auspices of security. But as I'll show you, there is actually no grounds for any of these measures based on their own data and their own information that the ministers themselves are using to justify these actions. Thankfully, in the meantime, because of quite a number of protests that have taken place, starting with a massive, potentially the largest multi-club fan protest in the history of Germany and possibly the world. 20,000 fans came together on November 16th in Leipzig before Germany's international World Cup qualifying match against Slovakia and showed exactly the kind of solidarity that is what keeps the power in the fans' hands. There was a great moment that was quite played up on social media among the fan scenes of Dynamo Dresden and Hansa Rostock fans passing each other during the protest. And you have to understand this is one of the most hated or hateful and ferocious rivalries in German football. So to see them standing shoulder to shoulder, or at least passing shoulder to shoulder, without so much as a harsh word to one another alone should show you how safe football is in Germany and how much the fans can actually control themselves when they want to. More than 50 clubs took part from all levels of the German football pyramid. More than roughly 20,000 fans total brought together on relatively short notice to say that football is already safe, to say no to political populism, which in this instance refers to the interior ministers having failed on many occasions at their job, and so looking for an easy target in demonizing football fans. There is still some questions now. Two more things that were on the agenda that are still pushing ahead as of the second day of the conference was, as of right now, the stadium bans in Germany are primarily issued by individual clubs under the guidance of the German Football Association. So the German Football Association gives general principles and practices, and then the individual clubs working with fan liaisons deal out stadium bans as necessary. And one of the proposals from the interior ministers was to have a centralized authority to deal out stadium bans, taking the power away from the clubs, essentially, at least as far as I understand it. And also to make stadium bans more potent, as it were, to lower the level of proof. Basically, fans could be given bans on suspicion alone, potentially even indefinite bans. if what I heard on this was correct, which is both a form of essentially collective punishment and also definitely a removal of civil rights, because apparently then football fans do not have the right to a fair trial, and they do not have the right to innocent until proven guilty. This would have a real chilling effect on fans, and both in the sense of the more extreme, as you might call them, fans, the more active fans, but also just on fans in general. One of the concerns that I saw raised was that if these measures were brought into place, if there was ever trouble in stadiums that did require the attention of authorities, fans would be much less likely to actually bring that to the appropriate authorities or to get the appropriate help for fear of themselves being banned on suspicion of having been involved. And then one final issue that has been raised, and that unfortunately it does seem like the interior ministers will be going ahead full steam on, is a zero tolerance for pyro in stadiums. They say that it's unsafe, and yet their own statistics show that virtually no serious injuries take place, and that the amount of injuries from pyro is less than 0.04%, actually 0.004% of the total people who attend football matches in Germany. And even just from my observation of commentators, casual fans, anyone who sees pyro generally seems to love it. Even people I've shown pyro demonstrations and choreographed pyro who know nothing about football and generally don't know or care at all are generally extremely impressed and awed by a good pyro choreography. It's a huge part of the expression of the fans, and to take that away without any real justification, as honestly, looking into these proposals by the ministers, their own statistics show that football is extremely safe. It's actually, for example, safer than Oktoberfest and virtually all other large public events that are held in Germany. And it is also pretty much the safest league in Europe that still allows any sort of fan expression whatsoever. So to have any of these things pass would be completely baseless. There's really no reason for them to do it. Their own statistics that they try and quote show that it's not safe. The police chief, or one of the lead police officials in Hamburg, actually quoted that injuries and incidents had decreased according to official statistics, but somehow saw that as a justification for massively increased repressive measures. Try and figure that one out. Also, it should be noted that the interior ministers of Germany have generally not been doing a great job recently. There's a number of subjects that they have failed on, including their total, and this is from them, this is not from me or from fan perspective, this is paraphrasing their own conclusions in the aftermath of these incidents. But the most pressing of which was the floods in Western Germany, where over 150 people died, roughly 180 people died. And after the fact, the Interior Ministry had to admit that they had basically completely failed to prepare or do anything to prevent the disaster from happening. But they want to take the safest public events in Germany, and put all sorts of new measures in place to limit fans' freedom and rights. I can only assume so that they look like they're doing something. They are also still looking at for information regarding the stadium bans too. They're looking to have longer data storage, and there's questions about due process and how the information would be shared, which is not really being publicly disclosed. And it should be noted too that the active fan scenes, from what I understand, are not actually asking for all things to be completely, all of these measures to just be completely erased. they want to work with the German Football Association, the German Football League, and are willing to work with the authorities. They just want all of this to be done transparently. They want football to be safe as well. So the main issue is that all of these would be pushed through without the consent of the fans, without any consultation with the fans. And so far, football in Germany is extremely safe because the clubs, the associations, and the fans have actually created a very strong networks so that all of these issues can be addressed between all of the interested parties through discussion and debate and open communication. And that is one of the big issues that lies at the heart of this, is that the fans basically don't want to be cut out of the loop. And I think that's fair, given that the fact that they have been part of the loop is one of the things that has made self-policing of the fans very effective and has made football in Germany extremely safe. In the aftermath of these proposals being made public, the German fanzines came together under an organization, Fanzinen Deutschland, the Fanzines of Deutschland, of Germany, basically started to organize the active fanzines of virtually every club in Germany, which led to the major demo in Leipzig with the 20,000 fans from over 50 clubs there, and has also seen a 12-minute atmosphere boycott at virtually every game in Germany, with the exception mainly of Leipzig. But as I said, they're not a real club, so what do you expect? We had 2 weekends in a row now of extremely well-observed 12-minute atmosphere boycotts in which the fans covered their banners, lowered their flags, and did not sing. There was a little bit of noise, as you'd expect, just people, reacting, gasping, clapping to the events of the game. But the organized fanzines that really make the atmosphere of German football unique and strong and what it is, they kept silent. And from what I could tell, the general fans who attend the games that aren't part of the active fanzines also were very much on board with that. And that is as being explicitly noted in coverage of the Interior Ministers' Conference, that those protests have been very effective and that they were noted, and that is one of the reasons why the most dystopian of the measures have been abandoned for now as a response to those fan protests. Also seen the 5 professional clubs of the state of Baden-Württemberg, which would be VfB Stuttgart, SC Freiburg, Karlsruhe SC, Heidenheim, and Hoffenheim, come out and make a joint statement that football is already safe and that no blanket suspicion of fanzines is necessary or should be allowed. Several large clubs, including Hertha Berlin, FC Bayern, and Borussia Dortmund, have also made similar statements, or at least expressed similar sentiments. Hertha have been very strong on it. And right before the Interior Ministers' Conference, the clubs of the state of Lower Saxony, Hanover, Braunschweig, Osnabrück, and several others were also rejected publicly in a joint statement, blanket personalized tickets, and stood with their fans and on the side of the fans in this protest. This is also important beyond Germany, because Germany is the last living bastion of true fan power. Because of the Verein culture, the 50+1 culture, the fact that the German fans are basically by law majority owners of their clubs. They are the best model if we want football to stay a community asset and keep its culture alive and keep the cultures that football culture keeps alive. If you will notice, if you ever look into the German fanzines, they often are bastions of local language dialects, local traditions, local legends, local stories, and to erase or to inhibit the active fanzines of Germany would be also to put a dagger in the heart of a lot of regional cultural memory. And if the German fanzines were to be erased, that would also be damaging to football fans everywhere. because as we'd also know from politics, if there is an active living example, it becomes a lot easier for others to emulate that. So for any fans in England or Italy or France, for example, that would want to have more say, more influence in their clubs, in their leagues, in the way that football is run, in the way that football is lived in their countries, it's important that Germany's fan culture survives because they set an example that can be emulated. Whereas if they get crushed, there is no strong living example left. And once the living examples are gone, it becomes a lot harder to rebuild something than it is to simply emulate something that already exists. So that's the main story from German football this week. The Interior Ministers meeting, which will be finishing tomorrow, but strong indications have come out that the fan protests have already been effective. There is still some things to worry about. The centralized banning that could still potentially be on the table, and the zero tolerance for pyro would be a really sad development as well. But I guarantee you that the German fans will not rest on their laurels as long as the interior ministers have proposals that would harm fan culture. I guarantee you the fans will not stop until they have won. As I know that that's the case because they have won many similar battles in just the last few years. Just a couple of years ago, the German Football League introduced Monday night games, which are common across Europe now. But it's important to think of them from the perspective of the fans that actually attend these matches and go in person and keep the culture alive on the ground. To have a Monday night game is to have to, especially as a traveling fan, is extremely difficult and is extremely TV-centric, anti-fan scheduling. If you have a Monday game, that means anyone who wants to attend, especially from the away team, has to probably most likely take a day off work, or will have to make a crazy trip right after work and probably return in the middle of the night. They might have to stay overnight, which is increased cost. Or they might have to travel home in the middle of the night, which, I mean, if the Interior Ministry wants to talk about safety measures, maybe we shouldn't be expecting football fans to drive across the country in the middle of the night after a football match. So they brought in these Monday matches. The German fans sniffed out the problem early, and before they had even been implemented, began protests. The protests included all sorts of different tactics, including non-violent match disruptions to disrupt the TV product, atmosphere boycotts. They did boycotts of away ends to leave entire sections empty to show what it would be like if the fans were taken out of the game. This actually came to my attention. I didn't know anything about it at the time, but I remember watching a game back in that period where they were protesting the Monday games. It was a Monday game involving Eintracht Frankfurt, and the Eintracht Frankfurt Ultras left their entire stand empty. And boy, did that have an effect visually. It was quite jarring in a league where every game virtually, at least among most clubs, is sold out every game. And certainly the curvas are always sold out, the terraces where the Ultras stand, to see an entire block, a home block even, entirely empty. And it also took a huge chunk out of the atmosphere. No songs, no drums, just the noises that you'd hear at any sporting event anywhere, just oohing and awing and clapping. And boy, was it jarring when you're used to German football. But after years of relentless protesting, banners, boycotts, protests, information campaigns, massive organization, solidarity across rivalry, solidarity across all the clubs of Germany, basically, they got the Monday games canceled. And now Germany is basically the only major league in Europe that no longer has Monday games, because the fans didn't want it, because they hurt the fans. They fought back. They said no. They never relented. The Ultras never surrendered. And they won. And that wasn't the end of it. Just last year, and starting the year before, there was a investment plan. The Bundesliga wanted to sell a portion of future television revenues to outside investors, including some names you might be familiar with, like, for example, Blackstone, and which is one of the largest investment funds in the world. They own a little bit of basically everything. And as soon as the fans heard of this, the same tactics immediately. Nonviolent match disruptions, protest banners, protest marches, solidarity across the clubs, solidarity across the fan networks, even clubs that are huge rivals like Schalke and Dortmund and Bayern. Their fans came together in solidarity to say no to these measures as well. They said no to the investment because they saw it as selling off the future of the game and allowing for external influences from entities that did not care about German football as anything other than a commodity and a TV product. And once again, and even faster than with the Monday games, the relentless pressure, the relentless campaigns from the German fans won again. And within basically a year, major investors started dropping out, and the DFL was forced to cancel the plans for this investment, and the fans won again. So I have no doubt that once again, with these measures from the Interior Ministry, the fans will unite in solidarity as they already have, and they will keep fighting until they win. And remember, they're not being unreasonable either. They're not claiming to want to have like absolute control over German football. What they want is to stop having measures and proposals tried to have them passed behind their backs, basically. The fans want this to be a process of open engagement. They want to have a say, as they should, given that they are the majority owners of basically every club in Germany. There's absolutely no justification for keeping fans out of the loop. And honestly, the model in Germany has been open communication and at least hard-won cooperation between the fans, the clubs, and the German Football Association and German Football League. And it's been very effective. That's why German football is safe. That's why German football has amazing atmospheres. That's why German football has low ticket prices. That's why German fans are allowed to drink in their stadiums. That's why there's standing terraces in every football stadium in Germany, because the fans have worked with the clubs and the association to find measures that are acceptable to everyone. And I have no doubt that they will do so again. Have a couple little other side notes and stories as well. From last weekend, just as being personally an Union Berlin fan, I just wanted to note that during the match between Union Berlin and Heidenheim, the Union Berlin fans and ultras on the Waldseite Kurve unveiled a banner during their game with an emotional thank you to Oliver Runert, their longtime, now departing head scout and former sporting director, who joined the club in 2017 and was instrumental in their rise, guiding them through their first ever promotion to the Bundesliga in 2018, all the way through all 3 European competitions and ultimately into the Champions League, where, just a fun little note, the first ever game for Union Berlin in the Champions League was away at none other than Real Madrid, on the occasion of Real Madrid reopening their Bernabeu stadium after its major billion-dollar renovation. So I guess when Union go to the Champions League, they go big. Also, just a sad note on the fan scene front. In researching for this podcast, I see that unfortunately Celtic have once again banned the Green Brigade Ultras It's a complicated situation that I don't know the full details with, so I'm not going to jump in too much. There's accusations flying both ways, but it saddens me to see them banned. They were one of the first ultras groups that got me into the fan scene world, and I appreciate their courage and tenacity in standing up for what they believe in. As someone who's a big admirer of Celtic Football Club and their history, it's sad to see the club once again at war with their own fans. So that's pretty much the roundup of the main news today. Just give a little rundown of a little more about this podcast and where I look to take it as we go forward. This being the first episode, I'm just trying to get my feet under me, get something out. Something's better than nothing, so hopefully this has been enjoyable. Still got a little ways to go, but I'm just going to let you know where I'm looking to go forward with this. Firstly, it's important to repeat that this is supporter-funded and culture-first. I don't intend to take any sponsors, definitely no betting ads, and no paywalls on fan stories. I look to only get voluntary contributions. I hope to make something that is meaningful and that football fans can find value in, so that they choose to support me because they feel like my work is worth their hard-earned money. I'll be covering fan scene news primarily from Germany, but I will definitely be keeping an eye out for news like, for example, the Celtics Green Brigade news. Be focusing on the news from the terraces, not the boardrooms. I would like to start having a segment. I wanted to this week, but didn't have the time to get it out, to get it ready on time. But honoring away fans, particularly those making the hardest away trips. Some that I have seen recently was Lyon making Olympique Lyon from France having to make a away trip for a late Sunday. I think it was late Sunday or even Monday night game to Brittany, which, in case you don't know, is literally on the complete opposite side of the country, and France is gigantic. So kudos to the Lyon fans that made that trip, because it was about 12 hours each way by car, somewhere in that range. And also for a very late kickoff on a Sunday or Monday night. So you can only imagine the logistical nightmare of trying to follow your team away to the other side of the country for a game that will end after 10 p.m. local time, and trying to find your way back in time to not lose your job. I imagine ultras are probably pretty savvy and probably have jobs that allow them to be a little bit more flexible, but it's a hell of a trip, and it's not uncommon in France and Spain in particular. And I'll be covering and honoring the away fans that make those epic journeys, and covering the brutality of some of this pro-TV anti-fan scheduling, and also explaining the differences in how that goes in different countries around Europe, particularly the Big Five leagues, and what the difference in character is, because you will note, as I do that segment over time, that Germany tends to have the least anti-fan scheduling, and France and Spain tend to have the most, with Italy and England falling in between. And there's some interesting reasons behind that, so we will get into that. I'll also be covering stories of when the fans have won in the past, stories of real victories, like the investment deal, like the Monday games. There's many, many, many stories, both big and small, from Germany and all across Europe. I've also got, we'll be looking at saving football's soul through the current battles right now, and through moments of just fans stepping up and keeping their clubs alive, keeping their traditions alive. A story that comes to mind is the Union Berlin fans when they had won promotion, but their stadium was not to the Bundesliga. I think it was from the third division to the second division. I don't have the note on that in front of me at this moment, but I'm pretty sure it was in the third division to the second division. Their stadium was not up to scratch at the time, the Stadion an der Alten Försterei, and so they basically had no money, but they needed to get their stadium up to certain conditions to be able to get the right to play in the second division. So thousands, or well over 1,000 fans contributed hundreds of thousands or 100,000 hours of labor. I'll bring you the full story with the proper details. But they've contributed their own time, their own effort, worked for free, and basically rebuilt the whole stadium by hand from scratch. They had to basically tear the whole thing out and rebuild it themselves. And they did it just because they loved their club. Around the same time, they also had a campaign, Bleed for Union. In Germany, you get money for donating blood. So they had a campaign where the fans would donate blood and then donate the money that they got for their blood to the club to keep them afloat financially through some of the hardest years. So we'll be covering stories like that and saving football's soul. I hope also to do regular monologues or short essays on culture and meaning, the deeper meaning of football, and football is ritual, football is culture, the power of football, and working class history. One idea, for example, that you'll probably see pretty soon is comparing the clubs RC Lens from the north of France and FC Schalke from Germany, two clubs that are rooted in their deep working class mining history. They're basically clubs with coal dust running through their veins. They're both, you basically can't take Schalke out of Gelsenkirchen. They're basically the same thing. The city of Gelsenkirchen is basically Schalke with a neighborhood surrounding it. And to give some idea of RC Lens, their stadium actually has a larger capacity than the population of the city, and yet they've been sold out for well over 70 games now in a row, and are one of the most well-supported clubs in France, and have arguably one of the best atmospheres, if not the best atmosphere in all of France at their Stade Bollaert de Lille. Another stadium that stadium of my own heart. They have not one, not two, but 3 ultras terraces in the stadium, which is pretty unheard of because most clubs, even with the best supporters, usually only have 1 terrace. So that will be the sort of story I'll be covering there. This will be mostly about Germany, but I will also be keeping an eye on and sharing in clubs that have real spirit, real community, real culture, and that are especially strongly linked to the place, the people, and the history of where they are. So RC Lens in France would be a good example, and they're tied to the mining community there. Napoli in Italy as a representative of southern Italy and the living embodiment of their city and their spirit. Celtic and Rangers in Glasgow as crossing the sectarian divide there. Celtic as the Irish Catholic diaspora, and Rangers as the and Unionists. Rangers as the Unionists, and the Protestants. So definitely, I'm sure one of the ones that people are most familiar with, the Celtic Rangers divide, but both representing deeply their parts of Glasgow. And of course, Athletic Club Athletic Club Bilbao, who have a legendary Basque-only policy. Players have to have been born or trained in Basque country, and so they have that's basically unique in European football. I'd also love to hear from my listeners too, amplify their voices and stories, invite listeners to contribute their terrorist stories, match recommendations, and definitely any fan campaigns, protests, anything like that they would like to have amplified to an English-speaking audience. I'd be happy to. It could be in Germany, could be in the United States or Canada, could be South America. I am here to be a voice for the fans and the fan culture around the world. So if you have something that you would like me to share in an episode about something that you or your club is up to in terms of fighting for the soul of football, I am happy to share. Sometimes I might spin off some standalone essays or monologues as videos on YouTube, but that's probably looking a little bit down the road. But for now, I'd rather start raw and honest than polished and fake, and I would definitely love to evolve this with any listeners that join in. I want this to be the best it can be for any listeners that I to tag along the way. This isn't meant to be about me. This is meant to amplify the stories of football, football soul, and fan cultures around the world. But before I go, I will just look back real quick on the weekend that was. I tend to like to watch a lot of football, and I tend to like to watch the most atmospheric matches that I can find. I love a loud crowd. I love a good cultural story, and I love a good club anthem. So I'm just gonna look back on the matches that I watched this past weekend or this past week. Give a couple notes. I of course watched Union Berlin's game against Heidenheim. Union Berlin were leading most of the match. Gave it away at the end. Heidenheim came and took it. It won 2-1. Getting the winner with the last kick of the game. Obviously a bit of a kick in the teeth for an Union fan, but I like Heidenheim's small village story. They came up just a little bit after Union and took a similar route all the way to Europe, so I have a soft spot in my heart for them, and they've had a tough season, so if Union had to donate points to anyone, I'm glad that they donated them to Heidenheim. I watched Crystal Palace against Manchester United. I generally don't really like watching the Premier League. It's too commercial for me. But I do like watching a good Crystal Palace match at home. I like that Crystal Palace has pretty much the only ultras group in the top division of English football, at least. The shout out to the Holmesdale Fanatics. They make blanking on their Selhurst Park. They make Selhurst Park, in my opinion, by far the best atmosphere in the Premier League. They were quite tired after a Thursday trip to Strasbourg in the Conference League. So they went out to a 1-0 lead, but United came back 2-1 in the second half because, honestly, Crystal Palace were absolutely tanked. So it's too bad for the home fans, but they came back and won this past weekend. Or this past midweek, I should say. They've got Englische Woche midweek games in the Premier League. I was excited. I got to see the El Gran Derby from Sevilla in La Liga. I don't watch a lot of La Liga either. It doesn't tend to fit into my schedule very well. But that's a game from Spain that I always love to watch. That one and the Basque Derby are the two games I try to never miss on the Spanish calendar. And though the game was at Sevilla's Pizjuan Stadium, Real Betis came out the winners 2-0. It was a ferocious atmosphere, absolutely rocking the entire time. There was a little bit of crowd trouble at the end. The Betis fans were celebrating a little too vociferously in front of the Sevilla main fan stand, and some stuff was thrown onto the pitch. And despite the Sevilla and Betis players being happy to just continue on with the game, the ref called the players off the pitch for 15 minutes. Things were able to resume. Betis got their win in the end. With both PSG and Marseille slipping up, I watched Angers against Lens. It was away in Angers. The Lens traveling support was excellent. They had a pretty epic pyro display before the match. And 2 goals from their talisman, Florian Thauvin, saw Lens win. They also survived a late penalty being overturned. It would have given a chance for Angers to equalize in stoppage time. The penalty was overturned, and Lens managed to hold on to win 2-1 and go top of Ligue 1 for the first time in 21 years. So congratulations to the mining club from Lens. I also got to see the Derby del Sole, which is Napoli away at Roma at the Olimpico. Another buzzing atmosphere. Looked like a full house in Rome for one of the great derbies of Italian football. And like has been the case for Roma and both of these teams, honestly, a lot this season, it ended 1-0. Napoli getting the only goal of the game, winning away. But shout out to the Roma fans. Loved their anthem. It was belted out before the game as per usual. It was a great atmosphere, a great game to watch. Just the one goal, but really great Italian football. I didn't have a chance to watch the whole match between HSV and Stuttgart, but I caught the end with HSV winning in dramatic fashion in front of their home fans with a goal with basically the last kick of the game to beat Stuttgart 2-1. And then on Wednesday, it was Union Berlin hosting Bayern Munich for the second time in just a couple of weeks. With the exception of Arsenal beating Bayern Munich in the Champions League a week or two ago, Union Berlin are the only team to have taken points off of Bayern Munich this season in all competitions. The team that ended their perfect streak in the Bundesliga with a hard-fought 2-2 draw at the First Rai a couple weeks ago. They were back at the First Rai on Wednesday, and it was an insane atmosphere. Unfortunately, Union Berlin conceded 2 own goals, as well as a Harry Kane goal. But in the second half, they were attacked relentlessly. They absolutely dominated Bayern Munich, which is something that could, again, I didn't see the match, but maybe only Arsenal could claim this season. Union Berlin had them basically penned in their half, the entire second half. They pushed in front of their Waldseite, the Ultras Terrace, but they came up just short in the end, losing 3-2 in the cup. So Bayern Munich move on. Union Berlin are out of the cup. But also beautiful scenes after the game with the Union Berlin faithful serenading the team for probably almost 10 minutes after the game, really showing their love and appreciation for the fight and the effort to drive Bayern Munich all the way to the edge once again. And just a quick look ahead as well for anyone who wants some recommendations on matches to watch this coming weekend. There's quite a lot of epic derbies around Europe this weekend. Some I'll be able to watch, some I won't, so I'll just kind of fly through them real quick here for you. On Friday evening, Benfica hosts Sporting in the Lisbon derby, the great derby of Portugal. They're only a couple of points apart in the standings. It'll be at the Estádio da Luz, the home of Benfica. So these are two of the most supported clubs. They have, as far as I know, the 2 largest memberships of any clubs in the world, certainly in the top 5. And it's always an affair to stop Portugal when these two teams meet. So it'll be Friday night, Benfica hosting Sporting. Wolfsburg against Union Berlin. Not a particularly special game. Wolfsburg isn't the most exciting place to travel, but Union Berlin will be away at Wolfsburg. I will, of course, be watching that. Cologne hosts St. Pauli. Cologne, I love watching games that are in Cologne. Their stadium is one of the best in Germany. It's a great stadium in general, but they have a great atmosphere. They really bring the Carnival culture of the Rhineland to German football. And to play against St. Pauli, 2 of the great cult clubs of Germany. So that will be a 110% atmosphere. Both clubs are sort of, Cologne are having a bit of a mixed bag of a season. St. Pauli really struggling, though they won in the cup, so maybe they've reached a turning point there. But if you do watch that one, get there early to catch one of the great anthems of German and European football. FC Köln's anthem, Mehr Stunde, so die FC Köln, always spine-tingling. With them at the top of the table, I'll be checking out Lens away at Nantes, because I want to see if they can defend their position at the top of the table. And Nantes it is sort of culturally Brittany, but it is technically part of Loire Atlantique. So it's always a good atmosphere at their stadium as well. And you know that, especially being top of the league, the Lens supporters will be there in force as well. Probably can expect some pyro even. This is one I won't be able to watch because this league does not get coverage in Canada. But this weekend is the eternal derby of Croatia. Dinamo Zagreb are hosting Hajduk Split. The Torcida at Hajduk and the Bad Blue Boys of Dynamo are 2 of the most intense ultras groups in Europe. This will be one of the most epic derbies of the season, without a doubt, certainly when it comes to the fans and the atmosphere. Normally I wouldn't include this one, but the last game from Saturday, Inter Miami against Vancouver Whitecaps in the MLS Cup final. Having been educated, I tend to be more of a USL guy myself, and I don't really follow North American soccer /football at all, honestly. But there's a great storyline. Inter Miami, of course, is the home of Lionel Messi at the moment, and he will face off against another one of the great generational talents. In my opinion, the most underrated player probably of all time, Thomas Müller, who arrived mid-season from Bayern München and is now the captain of Vancouver Whitecaps. So it'll be interesting to see probably the most famous player, as other than maybe Cristiano Ronaldo, in Lionel Messi, facing off against probably the most underrated player of his generation, Thomas Müller. Being both Canadian and also a huge Thomas Müller fan, I certainly hope that the Vancouver Whitecaps win that. I don't know if I'll watch it or not, but I'll let you know on the next podcast. A few more games from Sunday. 3 huge derbies on Sunday, as well as a couple other major cultural clashes. First one, our early game, the Franken Derby, the Franconian Derby from Bavaria. Nuremberg hosting Greuther Fürth in what is actually the oldest derby in German football. It's been played, I think, over 200 times and dates back to between 1902 and 1904, depending on... The 1904 is the official start history of that derby, but a version of it was played as far back as 1902. The atmospheres in these games are crazy, big choreos, crazy noise, and huge tension. These are two cities that are basically spitting distance from each other. And as I'm sure some of you know, in football, that kind of proximity can breed some extreme contempt. They're even closer to each other than Hanover and Braunschweig, which is another underrated but massively fiery derby. Nuremberg are historic giants, and Greuther Fürth have the desire to get back to where they once were as well. We also have the Nord Derby in the Bundesliga, HSV against Werder Bremen, the Northern Derby. This is one of the great derbies of German football. A huge cultural derby, basically cousin cities, former independent cities in the north of Germany. There'll be a huge atmosphere in Hamburg. The teams are both, pretty close in the standings, pretty close on form. Hamburg had that huge come from behind win against Stuttgart, last second win against Stuttgart at home, but then also lost in penalties to another northern rival in Holstein Kiel in the cup midweek. So they had the highest of highs and then the lowest of lows. So it'll be interesting to see how they get up for the North Derby against Werder Bremen. Bremen will definitely fill out their away allotment, so it'll be a super intense atmosphere in Hamburg. They also have Juventus making the trip to Naples to play Napoli at the Maradona in Italy in the Serie A on Sunday evening. That's a great match and a huge cultural match. Juventus are the sort of the system club, the power club of Torino. Napoli representing the South. They carry all the history of being looked down on by the North. When Juve come to town, it's not just a football match. It's a chance for the city to sing in the face of everything it's told it's being by the North. If Napoli win, it's a ritual act of self-respect for a place that's had to fight for its dignity for generations. It's also a top-of-the-table match. Italy, it's quite stacked at the top of the table. But this is definitely a top match in Italy this weekend. Also have Celtic and Hearts, who are currently tied on points. Celtic have a game in hand. But Hearts have been out front all season, as Celtic and Rangers have been in a bit of chaos. Celtic have been kind of got their act together under Martin O'Neill, which I don't know if this will be his last game or the first game of their new coach. But it'll be at Celtic Park, sans the Green Brigade, unfortunately. The standing section will be closed, so that'll take some punch out of the atmosphere there, but should be plenty good on the pitch with Celtic looking to take top spot, Hearts looking to defend their position at the top of the league. And then one more, possibly the most chaotic, fiery, fiercest derby of the lot. And Sunday, it's the Derby of Thessaloniki, PAOK against Aris. This is if anyone knows anything about Greek football or has seen any of this on social media or anything, this is one of the craziest, most intense derbies in world football. PAOK and Aris are a real city divided. It's about pride, it's about class, it's about politics, it's about history. This is raw urban ritual if you've ever seen it. This is one that I won't be able to watch because, again, Greek football is not covered in Canada. But it allows me to segue in perfectly that if you want to check out at least the atmosphere of this match, I would recommend going on social media afterwards, X and Instagram, because a lot of the ultra scenes and stuff like that, there's a lot of aggregator accounts that share the videos and images from derbies and big matches, choreos, pyros, protests, the whole works. And if you don't know where to look, you can go and find my Instagram, the Soul of Football Podcast. Go to my reposts. I go every weekend and try and find the best examples of all the best of fan culture from the weekend, the pyros, the choreos, the protests, the tifos. And I repost from the best sources that I've found. You can also then go, when you go there, you can go and follow those ones yourself and start your own collection of sources to find this. But I would highly suggest you go and check out social media after this weekend, see the best of the Lisbon Derby, the Derby of Thessaloniki, the Nord Derby, the Franken Derby, the Eternal Derby, especially the Eternal Derby and the Derby of Thessaloniki. If you want to follow this podcast, it'll be available on RSS, Spotify, all the podcast places. I'll also have a YouTube channel, so I'll be posting it there. You can find me on Instagram, the Soul of Football Podcast. I have a Ko-Fi if anyone wants to support me. I have just one tier for voluntary donations starting at €1, but you can give that, or you can give whatever you want if you feel so inclined. I would imagine that early on, it's maybe asking a bit much after this one podcast, but if you really like what you heard or you want to hear more and support me in this project, you can find me on Ko-Fi, the Soul of Football. All the links will be available in all of the places. And I'm developing a Discord, but it's still a bit of an empty shell at the moment. I'd love to start a Discord community so I can keep this all centralized, have more engagement with viewers, be able to collect stories, share stories, and build a real community around this, because ultimately football is community. It's not meant to be a commodity. So thanks for listening to this very first episode of The Soul of Football. If something in this resonated with you, if you recognized your own love for the game in any of this, then you are exactly who this is for. This show is going to grow and change over time. I want it to grow with you, so if you have a story, a terrorist, a club, or a struggle you'd like to hear talked about, reach out and let me know on Instagram, Discord, email, wherever you can find me. In the episodes ahead, we'll dive into the fan scene news, the true pilgrims on the road, the moments when supporters fought back and won, get those deeper monologues out about what's happening to the game and why it still matters. And I'd love to hear what you guys think, what you'd like to hear about. But until next time, take care of yourself, take care of your club, take care of your people, and never forget, football has a soul because you do. Thanks for being here at the very beginning. Remember, football is a community, not a commodity. And never forget, love is the answer.